Good evening. Thank y'all for coming. I'm Hank Batts. I'm going to be doing some poetry to begin with, and we're going to take about a 10-minute break and start back with some prose I've written. And all of this just about is about farm life, stuff I've learned growing up on the farm and stuff I've realized being there. We live on a family farm that's been in our family for 200 years. The name is Oakdale Farm. It's in the Lockertsville community, and I'm telling you that because you'll hear those two names during this presentation. This old farm is home to me, brings back thoughts of what used to be. Cows and horses, hogs and mules, and sheds plumb full of critter drawing tools. A rastus, a gee-whiz, a double shovel and more, tools that are now just part of yesteryear's lore. Not enough porch sitting in hog killings, or drinking from a spring, or long walks in the woods where you notice every little thing. There's too much hustle and bustle and running around. Seems like everybody's trying to get into town. I did that a few times early in my life, and all it got me was headaches and strife. I'm glad to be home now, where my ancestors lay, so I can enjoy every God-given day. You can't go home again, I've often heard said, but I plan to stay till my old body is dead. Then it can be buried under that old maple tree, which is a very fitting place for my ancestors and me. When I was in college, I ran into some friends that I hadn't seen in a few years, and they asked me what I was doing. I told them, so I'm going to school to get an ag degree, and I'm still farming. And one of them kind of got this funny look on her face, and she waited a second to decide what to say. And you're just an old farmer, she said with a smirk. You'll spend all your days with your hands in the dirt. You'll never be more than a redneck old man who'll never get farther than that old piece of land. You're right, I said. And then I began to tell her the things it takes to work the land. I got a college degree just like you to learn many things so I can do what I do. I learned biology, nutrition, and things like that so I can raise my cattle to be pretty and fat. I took chemistry, plant science, soil science, and more so I can grow quality food that you buy at the store. Then I studied econ, statistics, accounting, and business law, hoping to help make the farm turn a profit for all. I've had calculus, geometry, ag engineering, and more so I can measure a field and build a barn with a door. Yes, I'm just an old farmer who works God's green earth, and I plan to keep doing it because I know what it's worth. It's a noble profession to live off the land and to preserve this beauty that God painted by hand. I feel beholden to those who worked it before and hope I can pass it on to my children and more. I'm just an old farmer till the day that I die, and I hope that is written when I've said goodbye. And then I graduated from school and got married to my lovely wife, Miss Deborah, and we had to move off because of our jobs, and we finally decided to move back home. And that was the smartest decision I guess we ever made. And along with regular crops, we raised a lot of vegetables to sell on the market. And it became a joke around town with some ladies, and I think one of them may be here, I'm not sure, that began calling me the flip-flop farmer because I have a tendency to wear flip-flops all summer if at all possible. So this is kind of about that. The flip-flop farmer just pulled into town in that ragged old truck, so battered and brown. He parks on the square, opens his door, sets up his sign that says veggies and more. He drops down the tailgate and sets up his scales, gets out his old coin box, he's ready for sales. They trickle in about 2 at a time, to buy some vegetables for a meal so sublime. They's corn, they's beans, he says with a smile. They's tomatoes and squash and melons in a pile. Much obliged, he says, after every sale. Won't you take a load off and sit for a spell? Well, most are too busy to chat for a while, so they hurry on off in modern day style. A young couple walks up with a child in tow. Is it organic? They want to know. Well, you see, he says, I don't grow it like it. And all that tends to do is make my worms grow fat. My veggies are wholesome and grown on my farm. Been eating them for years and never did me no harm. Takes a special farmer to grow things that way. Not saying it's wrong, just not my way. I'll sell you my produce and I'll guarantee they've never been touched by anyone but me. No thanks, they say, and wander all on off. The farmer just shrugs at the sale he just lost. Well, live and let live, he thinks with a grin, and turns his attention to his patrons again. At the end of the day, he packs it all up and gets to the cab of that battered old truck. As he drives back home to his old family farm, he thinks of the couple who meant him no harm. We are all different in our own special way, he thinks to himself the rest of the day. As he goes in the house to get him some rest, the flip-flop farmer knows he is blessed to live in a country so strong and so free, to let folks decide what they want to be. So the old flip-flop farmer goes in, he has his supper. When he gets done, he and his wife go out and sit on the front porch like country people often do. And off in the distance, he hears a coyote. And he gets thinking about that, because it's amazing what you hear in the dark of the night when out in the country where the stars shine so bright. A few horned owls with their calls of 8 hoots, they talk among themselves like old men in groups. The crickets, the frogs, the whippoorwills too, seem to be talking to their own little crews. A tug down on the river, pushing barges on down to get them in place at the next harbor town. A dog off in the distance is barking with zeal to protect his humans from both imagined and real. A coyote, a fox, a deer with her fawn, the sounds just keep coming from dusk until dawn. I'm blessed to live where I can hear all of this instead of traffic and sirens and a train's air brakes hiss. We should all slow down and take time to hear these things, because we never know what the next day brings. When laden with stress and worry and strife, sit in the dark and hear this wonderful life. And I wrote this about a month or so ago, and I'm getting on up in age, and for those of you who know me well, I'm on a cane about half the time. And I wrote this about that, and I was lucky enough to be asked to speak at my uncle's funeral a few weeks ago, and I thought about this one morning, so I read it there. It's called, I'm in pretty good shape for the shape that I'm in. He walked with a cane and often fell down. That little old man seen all over town. His hearing was shot and his eyes were real bad. He always wore shades when the lighting was red. He was all scarred up from his head to his toes from living his life as a man often does. Breaking horses to ride, sitting atop a young bull, climbing mountains freehand so his life never got dull. Water skiing with gators deep down in the south. Getting beat up for running his mouth. Spent most of his money on women and booze. Wasted most of the rest on things he could lose. When asked, he answered, I'd do it all again, because I'm in pretty good shape for the shape that I'm in. I think about a lot of things when I'm sitting on the porch in the morning having coffee, or when I'm sitting there at night. And I had just been listening to some folks talk one day, and they were talking about sinners. And basically what they were doing were giving sinners a hard time. And I just listened, kept my mouth shut. Y'all know that's hard for me to do, but I kept my mouth shut. But I got to studying on it later on. Well, I was sitting out on the porch that night, listening, and this came to me. So I wrote it, posted it on Facebook, I think first last week, and I got a message from a good friend of mine that said she was supposed to speak at her uncle's funeral that day. And she was having trouble coming up with something that she should read while she was speaking. So she got up and had her coffee, clicked on Facebook, or space page for you, Pa, and she saw my post. And she said immediately after reading it that she knew that summed up his life. I'm honored that my friend read this at her uncle's funeral. I'm just an old sinner, he said with a smile. I can live with that for a long, long while. 'Cause I've talked to God and spoke with his son, and the good book says we'll sin till our races run. It says those without sin should cast the first stone. Best I remember, not a single one was thrown. Peace, love, and hope are three things we were given. And if we practice these, we have a chance at heaven. So love that neighbor. Give them some hope that peace will soon settle on their hearts and their home. Now, all of us in life, well, I won't say all of us, but 99.9% of us in life go through a spell where we make a lot of poor decisions. I'll admit, I've made them from the time I was old enough to make a decision till now. Make them all the time. And there's a song that was done several years ago called The Long Black Train. And often when I make a bad decision, or when I'm thinking about making a bad decision, I think about that song. You don't want to get on that long black train. And that's the name of this is Poor Decisions. Poor decisions are easy to make when one decides another drink to take. It's easy to act just like a fool when you're perched atop an old bar stool. Everything looks better after enough to drink when the liquor affects the way that you think. Your mind plays tricks when you've had enough wine, and often tempts one to step out of line. It tempts one to ride on that long, dark train. It's hard to get off when it's moving so fast. One never thinks this ride will be the last. We'll take that ride once our bodies are worn from living our life since the day we were born. Dust to dust, the preacher will roar, but it's at that time our spirits will soar. To where we don't know, it's for our Creator to decide, and that's where we'll forever reside. Most wish for heaven, that land up above, so we can look over those that we love. Mercy and grace is what we want for our sake, so we need to rethink those bad decisions we make. Now, I've got this thing called situational awareness, I've been told by many that's in the military and in law enforcement. And what situational awareness means is you're not paying attention to just what's right in front of you. You kind of keep your eye on the whole situation. And I think I get that probably from farming, from hunting and fishing, because if you don't pay attention on the farm, you're going to get hurt. And if you don't pay attention when you're hunting, you're just going to sit there. Same with fishing. So over the years, I've developed this situational awareness, and I quite often watch people and listen to people, and I come up with ideas from things I see and hear, and this is one of those situations. The young man walked in, he took a seat at the bar. It was plain to tell that he had traveled too far. He ordered a beer and took a slow sip, trying to relax from that very long trip. He turned his head just looking around, trying to see what was going on in this little country town. First thing he saw was a grizzled old man pouring whiskey down with his wrinkled old hand. "You ain't from around here," old man said with a smile, "but if you'll buy me a drink, we can talk for a while." The young man just laughed and set the old man up and watched his blue eyes as he took it in one gulp. "Don't look like much, this little old town, but man, it was something when I came around. Had feedlots and smiths and livery stables too, and lively dance halls for young men like you. Cattle drives came here, and horse traders and such, and all them hands were seeking a young woman's touch. Another round?" he asked. The young man just grinned, told the bartender to set him up again. Hattie's was one house, Bell's was another, and them boys looked at them two women like they was their mother. All that went away when the highway came through. Now all we see are strangers like you. Now enjoy your evening and rest up your bones, 'cause we all know tomorrow you're gonna get some gone. Young man thought slowly of what he should say when the old man got down and slowly stumbled away. "Who was that old man?" the bartender he asked. "Never seen him before," he said with a laugh. "Came in here about 2 hours ago to drink and spend the last of his dough. He conned you with that tall tale he just told. He rode in on a train from the tracks down the road." The young man just laughed. As he paid off his check, he thought to himself, well, what the heck. Said, "I enjoyed the story that old man just told. That's some of the reasons I'm riding this road. I'm looking for characters and stories and such to learn all I can of this land I love so much." I was at a meeting in Nashville last year, and of course, anywhere you go, if you smoke, you can't smoke inside. So every morning I'd get up and get my coffee, and I'd go stand outside in the cold, have my cigarette and my coffee. And this fella came out with the cowboy hat on. He was a cattle farmer from Missouri. And we were discussing how things were in Missouri compared to here. And about that time, she came through the door and asked for a light. It was obvious she'd had a very rough night. A gentleman rose, lit up her smoke. It wasn't very long before that old cowboy spoke. "I've been there myself," he said with a smile, "and it hadn't been all that long of a while. Said, a lady like you, so young and so frisky, might ought to lay off that Tennessee whiskey. You might end up like me, so old and so gray, but then again, who am I to say?" As she turned to leave, she said with a grin, "You've never worn these boots that I'm in." About 25 years ago, I was in a local hangout having a cup of coffee with the regulars, and the owner was there. A young lady at work for him was there, and her husband happened to be there. And the three of them were talking, laughing, and cutting up, and the husband said something picking to his wife, and she picked back, and they got going back and forth. And finally, the husband turned to the owner and said, "If she ever becomes my ex, I hope she becomes your next." And the owner just laughed, and sure enough, 2 years later, they got a divorce, and she ended up marrying the owner. So I kept that on my mind for a lot of years. I thought, Brian, now that's a hook, buddy. When my ex becomes your next, that's a hook. So here we go. I read it in the paper, and I heard it on the news. When my ex becomes your next, her alimony's through. She's tormented me for 10 long years and kept me so broke I can barely buy beer. Now, some poor guy has a ring on her hand, and I'm glad to know it's a gold wedding band. I should tell that old boy that she's mighty risky, but it won't be too long till I can afford good whiskey. I'm anxiously awaiting for them to say I do, for then I can finally bid her adieu. And by the way, I think the owner has bid her adieu since then too, so. I was sitting in a local watering hole in a middle Tennessee town, a little larger than Ashland City, eating wings one night for my supper and having a cold beer with it. And these two young men came in and sat down beside me, and it was obvious they were not from around there. They had on shirts that had their company name, and they were in town doing a job. And I got to listening to them talk as young men do. It's pretty funny. One of them turned to the other, and he said, man, there's too many women in too little times, and sure wish I could make all of them mine. There's blondes and brunettes and redheads sublime. And all I could think is they sure do look fine. I know it's wrong to be thinking that way, but I can't seem to help it after a day like today. A friend once said they all are the same, except for hair color and different names. I tend to agree up to a point, but so are the men in this dim little joint. It's closing time, and the lights just came on. And I'm glad I ain't taking one home. Said you could put them together and wrap them with a wreath and still not come up with a mouthful of teeth. Now, for those of y'all that have read any of my stuff on Facebook, you know I've got 3 dogs that aren't my dogs. And I spend a lot of time with them on the porch. And I got thinking about this one day. The dogs, sometimes they don't even like me. They'll scurry off the porch or whatever when I come in. And I got thinking, it's a shame that I'm so old and ugly that my dogs don't even love me. So I'm hoping that my ex will take them home. Since we're out of matrimony, I hope there is no palimony, so that I'll have cash and time to freely roam. I need a long vacation touring all of this great nation to see and feel the beauty that is here. From the deserts in the west to the mountains in the west and the beaches and the oceans I hold dear. All right, we're going to take about a 10-minute break now, if that's okay. I need to get down and stretch my legs. I know, H, you're about to fall asleep, but that's all right. And when I come back, I'm going to read some of my prose that I've written and probably some of my cons, too. I don't know. But thank you for being patient with me and listening. Be right back. I'm going to read some prose that I've written. Like I said, a lot of it's about life on the farm, things I've learned on the farm. And some of it is just about crazy crap that runs through my mind. So we'll start out with this one. As many of you know, I have Manure's disease, which makes you stumble and fall, and it also fogs up your thinking a lot of times. And I got up not too long ago, went out on the porch, and it was so foggy I couldn't see hardly the road, which is 200 foot from my house. So Oakdale's fogged in this morning. I sat on the porch having my coffee. I hear a rain crow off in the distance, gently cooing for rain as a murder of true crows closer in make their usual racket. Walnuts are dropping onto the roof of an old corn crib, sounding like a drummer striking a cymbal. To me, it's the music of the morning. To the old folks, this fog is a sign. It's a sign of snow to come later this winter, a snow that'll benefit this old farm by gently replenishing moisture and naturally occurring nitrogen as it slowly melts and seeps into the soil. To me, the fog represents many days of the last 10 years. The days that Manure's takes away my ability to see and think clearly. The days that I clumsily walk into objects due to the lack of depth perception. The days my hearing is fuzzy and distorted, just like sounds distorted by the fog. The beauty of this is that eventually the fog will lift and all will be clear and beautiful again. That's how I feel on days that there is no brain fog. Everything is beautiful and everything is right in my little world. If you ever have a day or a period in your life where you feel fogged in, when you can't see what's in front of you and when it seems the whole world is closing in on you, please remember one thing. The fog will eventually lift and your world will be bright and clear once more. That's just been another one of my front porch ramblings. Now, a lot of times I come up with sayings just kind of off the cuff that I don't even know where they come from. But this is one that I've used for a long time. So when I'm pleasantly surprised, a lot of time I'll say, well, dip me in horse manure 20 miles from water and call me stinky. Now, I don't know why I used horse manure because I've been covered with a lot more cow manure and it stinks a whole lot worse than the horse manure does. And it gets all over you a lot worse too. So anyway, anybody that's ever worked with livestock knows that inevitably you're going to get covered with manure and it's going to stink pretty bad. And quite often it happens at the beginning of the day. All you can do is just kind of wipe your hands off, wipe your face off with a towel or whatever, and just go on about your business. Because you got to get the job done. That's just the way it is. So no matter what you do, all day long, you keep smelling this smell, and it still stinks, and it's just miserable. And if you apply this lesson to life, if you did something that would embarrass your mama, got to running with the wrong crowd, or were just a toxic person sometime in your life, remember this. No matter how long and hard you try to get rid of the smell, that aroma will be stuck in someone's nostrils for life. Just like that cow manure. And I wrote most of these last winter, so therefore some of them's going to be about cold, and this is one of them. It's just another cold, miserable day here in Lockersville. We all complain about how bad it is, but there's some really good reasons for this bad weather. As many of you in ag know, seeds need cold weather to do their thing. Cold stratification is the name given to the process of cold and damp weather, helping to break down a seed's protective coating that it will properly germinate once warm weather comes. Snow picks up atmospheric nitrogen as it falls to earth, so when it melts, it not only adds to the water table, but it also adds much needed nitrogen to the soil naturally. What I'm trying to get across is really good things can come from miserable adverse conditions. Please try to remember this anytime you're feeling down or something bad happens to you. Maybe, just maybe, something wonderful will come afterwards. As I sit here on the porch this morning, there's an enormous amount of quietness surrounding me. I can hear one dog off in the distance barking at something he smells or imagines as a threat. I can hear what may be the deep sound of a barge moving on down the river a couple of miles away. I hear the breathing of the sleeping dogs. Mostly what catches my ear is the gentle sound of the wind blowing through the leaf limbs of the trees. The sound seems to be talking to me in a gentle whisper. I really have no idea what it's trying to tell me. Maybe it's saying that we're all just blowing through this life. Maybe that I need to move like it is and accomplish something. What I like to think it is that the old master is telling me that he's blowing my troubles away. Just like the old gospel hymn says, peace, be still. I'm sure all of y'all remember last year when there was a school shooting and Marshall County, Kentucky. A young man walked into the school and began indiscriminately firing. And there was a lot of stuff on the news, there was a lot of stuff on Facebook, any type of social media, the back and forth of gun control, the back and forth of what we need to do, the teachers didn't do enough, all of the criticism that you hear from all sides. And it's just useless and ridiculous to do that when there's such a tragedy. And I wrote this the morning after that. As I sit here this morning, my thoughts go out to Marshall County, Kentucky. The tragedy there yesterday morning is just too hard for me to grasp. The actions of one obviously disturbed young person not only took lives, but also affected the lives of the whole county. I ask that no one use this terrible tragedy for political purposes. I ask that instead, pray for healing for all involved. I ask that we all work together to get help for the mentally ill. I ask that we love more and judge less. I ask that we all try to give support to those in need. You see, a good friend of mine teaches agriculture there. She's an intelligent, vibrant, beautiful young lady. She started her career at Harpeth High School and was then offered the job at her alma mater. I'm glad to say that she wasn't physically injured, but like all that were there, she'll be deeply scarred for life. Pray for her healing and for the healing of all affected. Thank you. The young dog and I are sitting on the porch, watching and listening to this gently falling rain. Fog rolls up out of the hollows to higher ground, covering the farm with an ethereal blanket. As I sit here, I know the rain is going to be beneficial in the near future. It'll go to the water table, where it'll keep grass, trees, and crops alive so they can survive their dormant months and be ready to burst forth with growth and beauty come spring. This is the natural circle of life that we all go through. I like to think of it as a great creator's way of replenishing the earth for the future. I've found that many times in life, when I'm dormant or stressed, I can go to His Word and find replenishment and refreshment to help me through to better days. Days that I might grow and burst open. Not with beauty, of course, but with a new and brighter outlook on life. I might suggest that it could help you also. Try it sometime. Now, like I said, we live on a farm that's been in our family 200 years. I'm lucky to be the 8th generation to live and work on that farm. My children and my nieces and nephews are the 9th that have had the privilege of working on that farm and living there. And I really hope that Deborah and I's grandkids will be able to do the same thing at some point. And as I sat on the porch this morning, I was looking over what's now a hayfield and a couple of ponds we have for fishing and picnicking. As I gaze over the property, my mind goes back to what used to be. The old stock barn that sat in front of the smaller pond and the wood lot, which covered the area where the park area sits, were both integral parts of my early life on the farm. The barn was a wondrous place to me as a 6-year-old. It was usually full of hay and corn to feed my grandmother's herd of cattle. There was an old tack room with no longer used mule harnesses and hames. It contained several stalls and a central hallway. Just an old barn in most folks' mind. But to me, my siblings, my cousins, and our friends, it was so much more. The hayloft at old barn was where we would build forts with tunnels to play army or cowboys and Indians. It's where I received my first head wound from an ear of corn thrown by somebody from the other side. It's where I learned to shell ears of corn with a hand-cranked corn sheller and to feed the proper amount of baled hay to cattle. I saw my first calf pulling done at that barn. It didn't turn out too good. Later on, it became a shelter for the ponies and horses that we had as children. That old tack room held our saddles and bridles. We'd feed the horses there and usually caught them in the barn to get them ready to ride. That old barn's gone now. Torn down several years ago after too much time in the elements. I still miss that old thing. A lot of times when I'm around that pond, I'll stop right there where that barn sat and remember. It seems to me that we all need to just stop what we're doing and remember more. The old things, the new things, whether good or bad, we should keep them in our minds so we can learn from them. Listen and learn from the old folks so that their tales and songs aren't forgotten. Listen to the old trees and buildings, for they have songs to sing also. Most importantly, preserve these memories for future generations. I don't know what you think, but that's just my take. Now, we all know everybody likes to go to a zoo. Everybody loves to see the animals when they're little. You know, it's just amazing. And it's still amazing to me to see the different kind of animals that are out there in this world. But back in February, I got to thinking about zoos for some reason. I don't even know why. And kind of brought me to this. As a child, I loved going to zoos. I was enthralled with all the exotic animals and learning about them. When I became an adult, I wasn't very excited about visiting zoos anymore. And I've been to a few since then, but only to let my children have that experience. It always makes me sad and contemplative when I see these beautiful wild creatures penned up outside their native habitat. I have empathy for them, since I often feel that I'm in the same situation they are. I sometimes feel that I'm in a self-imposed prison. My mind is the warden holding the key, and I can't seem to convince it to free me. I'm sure much of this is caused because of health and the responsibilities of adulthood. But it seems no matter how eloquently I plead my case, my mind just says no. When this happens, I usually ask my higher being to grant me peace and to convince the warden to unlock the prison door. It's truly amazing how often this will do the trick, and it really frees my soul. Now, I know someone hearing this feels the same way at times. I realize that something is heavy on your heart or locking up your mind or your body. Take it from me in the old writings. When this happens, talk to your higher being and ask for some peace. You may be pleasantly surprised at how quickly the warden understands and unlocks that door. May your day be filled with peace, love, and joy. Now, I wrote this back in January when we had for us, a major snow. If you remember, roads were terrible. Nobody could get anywhere. And I was out there on the porch watching. Just watching. It's interesting to just watch when the roads are slick. So for the past week, we folks in Middle Tennessee have been driving on layered roads, if we got out and drove at all. Now, the top layer was snow, the next was ice pellets, and the next was ice from freezing rain. Now, this can be about as challenging as herding cats if you live in the South, where we don't often have this kind of weather. On the back roads, the county highway department does the best they can with limited resources available. Our main form of snow removal is sunshine and good old boys with big tired four-wheel drive trucks and ATVs. Now you see these vehicles spin and churn that top layer of snow off to get down to the ice pellets. Now after a day or two, between them old boys and the sun, the layers are down to solid ice. Finally, after a few more days, the road is clear, dry, and ready for some kind of racing, because it's going to happen on Lockersville Road. If you think about it, a lot of things in life are like a road layered with winter precipitation. Take an onion, for example. You need to get the top layer off before it's good to eat. Same with a pineapple, an orange, or an ear of corn. A lot of times we just need to peel back the layers to see what's truly inside. I've met many a person that looked like one thing on the outside, but once you peel back the layers, their true identity was revealed, whether good or bad. I guess this just proves that, like icy roads, some people are rough on the top, but there's something wonderful and useful once you get through those layers. Please always check the layers. All right, I've got one more of these to read. Then I told you I was going to be done with my poetry, but I've got one poem after this that I want to do to be the last thing I do this evening. I've been asked that when I get through for the audience to please stay seated for just a couple of minutes so that Cheyenne and the crew can get some pictures of this great crowd that showed up tonight. All right. As I was sitting on the porch with the dogs this morning, I had an interesting thought. As the sun came slowly into view, it hit me that today is the last day of the first of my life. Now, to some folks, this may sound like a depressing idea. To me, it means that I have another chance to become a better person and to live life to the fullest. As you go about your day to day, I challenge you to put the first part of your life behind you and embrace the second part by truly living and trying to be a better person to your fellow man. This is the last thing I've written, most recent thing I've written. I started this about 3 weeks ago. I was sitting on the porch in the dark, and this thought came to me, and I got about 3 or 4 lines written, and all of a sudden I just went completely blank. I mean, lost all train of thought. And I've thought about it a lot since then, and I just couldn't seem to get it together. Well, this past Sunday night, my sister and I were on vacation in Pensacola, Florida, and I was having a little trouble sleeping. I walked outside and sat down on the balcony overlooking Little Sabine Bay, and it was just as beautiful as it could be. You could see the moonlight bouncing off of the bay that was just as quiet as it could be, and moon was out, puffy clouds, and for some reason, all of a sudden, the rest of this came to me. Bear with me, I hope I can get through this. Lord, I thank you for all the good things in my life, especially that fine woman you sent to be my wife. She's been a special friend to me and all of those I love. I often think of her as an angel from above. She's given me a world of hope when things were looking down, and let me know that she believed we could turn my world around. Through sickness and in health, she stood right by my side and been a solid anchor in life's often rough high tide. We have 3 great children that she has raised to be the kind of good-hearted humans that the world needs more to see. She's known by many names, but then she loves more than Mama and Wawa, from our offspring we adore. Now, Lord, I very seldom ask for very much for me, but at this time I truly pray you'll wrap her in your arms for all eternity. Thank you. I love you, baby. I love you too, kids. Thank all of y'all for coming. Please sit for just a few minutes so that they can get a couple of pictures.